Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the BBC. This BBC has nothing to do with Britain. This is the BBC, the Big Buccaneer channel, as in the Oceanside Pirates and Buccaneer Beach. Welcome to the BBC, the Oceanside station.
All right, this is the Big Buccaneer channel for May 13th, 2026. And we're going to suspend our regular programming for the Big Buccaneer channel today for a special edition of the BBC, the Oceanside station. And ladies and gentlemen, your host, it happens to be a birthday today for myself. And I was born in Oceanside a few years ago, and I happen to know two other gentlemen who also happen to have the same May 13th birthday as myself. They are both stalwarts, sort of big-time players in Oceanside, if you will, and I'm very happy to call them as friends, and I thought, what the heck, let's not come here live on May 13th on our birthdays, but let's have a birthday celebration show on May 13th that we pre-recorded, and we can talk about our early memories of Oceanside. And with us today is Ross Charles. Thank you for coming and joining us again. Again, you've been on the show before, sir, but you're back for our birthday edition. Thanks for being here.
Most welcome.
And Roddy Browning, who we know as the co-proprietor with his wife of the Flying Pig. And sir, thanks for joining us today, and happy birthday.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So much to talk about. And let's just start with our earliest remembrances of Oceanside. So I was born here in the 50s. Before there was a Tri-City hospital, there was a hospital up on Horn Street, which is now sort of on Sports Fisher, right there on that corner there. It takes up the whole block there. And then before we moved to South O, when I was 7, and I went to South Oceanside Elementary, which right after we moved here, JFK was shot. But that shows how many years ago it was. But we grew up, I went to a school called North Oceanside Elementary, and that was torn down, I think, in the late 60s. And in the first grade, right after the first grade that summer, I was on the Art Linkletter house party, one of those kids there. Then we, went to Oceanside High School and graduated in the 70s and went to college, went to work for record companies, worked for the Belly Up Tavern, wrote for various publications. And so here we are all these years later, very happy to be part of Oceanside. And, boy, it's hard to talk about what Oceanside was back in the 50s and early 60s. It certainly was a small place. There was a short street, which is where Oceanside Boulevard ended. It didn't extend all the way to Oceanside. It ended right there at Ditmar. And, there was the back gate, but all that area was just starting to be developed in the early 60s. I think the city only had like 20 grand total or so in the 50s. And of course, now it's 175,000. It seemed like everybody knew each other. And, Hill Street was the major thoroughfare. That changed, of course, right after I-5 was built. But man, it was such a homey, cool place when 1942, when Camp Pendleton arrived. I think Oceanside really arrived as a multicultural, multi-ethnic place, and that was certainly true at all the schools, the public schools I went to in Oceanside, and it still is a multi-ethnic, very diverse city today. Charles, you came here as a Marine, right?
Yes, I did.
And you enlisted in Jamaica?
No.
No.
In Florida.
Oh, okay. And what made you leave? You were a quasi soccer star or football star in Jamaica?
I got a scholarship to come to the United States. And then when I came here first, I had a friend that's in the Air Force. So when I came to Florida, it was my first time. And my friend flew from Korea, because he was in the Air Force, picked me up at the airport. So we were all there just kind of like enjoying kind of a thing. But soccer in Jamaica at the time was way, way beyond what soccer was in America at that time. So I was about to go to school about in September. So I came about in June, July, August. So while I was there, I kind of wanted to go back home. So after I wanted to go back home, a friend of mine said to me, if I go back to Jamaica, Jamaica will beat you. And school was not...
Jamaica would what?
Beat me.
Beat you?
Yeah.
Meaning what?
U.S., meaning that it's like, why get an opportunity? I want to go back to Jamaica. So I decided to... So my friend was about to leave. Soccer was not as popular here. And that's the reason why I wanted to go back. And she said, you can't do that. So my friend said, why don't you join the military? So I went and spoke to a recruiter. And I went to the Air Force first. And they kind of was not all that kind of very receptive. So I went to the Marine. So when I was going to the Marine, because I had a degree, I didn't know I could become like an enlisted officer. So I didn't say anything. So I remember when the recruiter talked to me, he said 3 things to me. He said, you can go to school, get a paycheck, and play soccer. And when he said that to me, the only thing that I think about is soccer. So when I was joining, I thought I was going to go as a soccer player. I wasn't thinking of joining like being as a soldier. So when I remember when I enlisted and I finished the paperwork, he said, "Have you changed your mind?" I said, "No." I said, "I finished the exam very quickly." So I remember the day when he came to pick me up and I was getting some soccer stuff. He said, "No, you don't need anything. They have everything." So I think these people was very cool. So when I went to, that night we get a flight. So I went to Paris Island as a recruit, but I went into one of those platoon that was just, it was like a Rambo platoon. But I didn't even know that I was going in to be like a Rambo kind
You're
of a
not a
soldier.
Rambo guy.
But anyhow, when I got there, I remember you get into the airport, so they make you get it at night. So you take a bus and you have to drive in, so everybody fall asleep. So when you get into Paris Island, you don't know where you are. The reason why I know where I was, because a few of my platoon cronies, they were trying to escape because they couldn't take it. It was difficult. So I was having an ulcer because I didn't really like the food. So I went to the Navy base, and it was off the base. And that's why I know what Paris Island was. So basically, when I went there, I thought I was a POW because, like I said, I wasn't joining as a soldier. So I wrote my recruiter one time, and I told him if I should ever see him on the street, I would take care of him. Because,
Wow.
because I kind of, so I'm telling you, and it was very difficult for a lot of people because you don't really know and they don't tell you the truth. But that's how I really.
So how long were you in the Marine Corps for?
A little over 3 years.
And you spent time, and people don't know this unless you were a long-time Oceanside local, you lived for a while at Sterling Housing.
Yes.
And that was the close we ever had in Oceanside, I think, to tenement housing. It was for Marines and their families, but man, it was a rundown area.
It was terrible.
And it was on Mission Avenue, sort of on the north side of Mission, right before Crouch Street, kind of, right?
Yes, it is.
Right.
Yes, it
And
is.
so how many units were there?
There are quite a few,
Like about 200, 300?
maybe, in that region. There was quite a few.
Okay, Sterling Housing, and it was there for Marines, and it was just it was horrible the way that it seemed like Marines were getting treated, right?
I wouldn't take my family there.
Yeah, but you had family, right?
No, but you had to get the help. My family was in Jamaica at the time. So when I applied for it and I finally get it, I remember when I went there, I thought it was just like a temporary stay until I get like a place, because I could not really understand how you could have military personnel who were fighting for a country could end up in a place like that. And I remember I had was to accept it, because when you're on the list of getting housing, if you rejected it, the waiting list can be long. So once you get it, you just take it. And then right after it, I spent a few times. So when my family was coming from Jamaica now, I get an apartment off base on Cannon Avenue.
And another thing that people don't understand is that back then, Oceanside didn't seem to appreciate or respect the Marine Corps.
No, absolutely not.
And
I never understand. Because even coming from Jamaica, when a lot of times people don't like the cops in Jamaica, but they always have high regard of respect for the military. And when I came here, sometimes I used to drive into work and I see military people walking. And even when you stop to give them a ride, they was surprised. But back in Jamaica, you know what I mean, that was like, you look at them as somebody of, great stature. But here it wasn't.
All right. We want to talk more about when you started hanging out in Oceanside and when you opened your business. But what we need to do first is speak to our other May 13th birthday Osider, and that would be Roddy Browning, who, sir, you had quite a history in restaurants before you came to Oceanside. You had a magnificent background in some very key restaurants.
Yeah, when I first got to town back in 2003, in San Diego, that is, I started working at a couple high-end restaurants downtown. I brought with me, I was a sommelier, which is a wine professional. I also, had a service background, had a management background, and just kind of fell in love with San Diego and started to kind of figure out what I wanted to do here. And Oceanside popped up on the map with my wife and I, and at the time she was my girlfriend, and was back in 2005 when, you had all these stated income loans and all this predatory lending and all this other kind of stuff. Well, obviously we got involved in one of those, but luckily we found a place in Oceanside, up on Loretta Street.
Right.
In a very, what everybody was saying was an up-and-coming neighborhood. And, we fell in love with the house. We fell in love with the area. And then I just happened to be driving by one day, and I saw this little sign in the window. It said for sale, and it was this little Asian market that was right behind the 101 Cafe, where the 101 Cafe is now. And, that's where it all started. So
That Asian market was sort of almost on the corner of Tremont and Wisconsin.
Yep.
But it had been over the years a beer bar called the Poorhouse, not to be confused with the Poorhouse in South Oceanside, but it was a beer bar, and it was also
called Mom's back in the day too.
Mom's, it was
Yep.
another bar, and it was also a Mexican fast food taco shop called Toes, I think.
Toes, yep.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That was at the idea of the landlord, John Daly. But anyway, so you opened the
Yep.
Flying Pig, in what year was that?
2011
Okay.
was March 29th, 2011.
Okay, but before that, you had moved to Oceanside.
I'd been in Oceanside since 2005.
Okay, and why did you guys want to buy in Oceanside? What was it that was it the promise? Was it that you could sense something? Was it like something ripe to be plucked? And to be developed. In other words, Oceanside was about to explode gastronomically, or what did you see?
Well, I think
opportunity. Or?
it was for one, we had an opportunity to actually buy a home, which is pretty rare because at the time my wife and I were, we were just waiters, and that was a pretty rare opportunity that we took advantage of. And it was the proximity of the beach. It was the harbor. The beach at the harbor, because last I checked, we're not making any more coastal southern, California communities. And I just felt like that there wasn't anything here, yet, but that you could start to see, that there was a lot of energy, like a lot of positive energy, especially when the culinary aspect. When you go to a community and you see that it's just like a wasteland and it's so close to, proximity to other special culinary communities like Encinitas, Leucadia, I mean, you really have to say it's just a matter of time. So I'm not sure that was 100% of the motivation, other than really it was a proximity to the ocean, because the beaches here, I mean, they're just beautiful. And the neighborhood that we moved into, it's, I spent some time in Santa Fe, New Mexico. My wife spent some time in Tubac, Arizona. We like more of a diverse type community, and that's exactly what Loretto was. It was just this nice melting pot of lots of different wonderful people. So we just felt comfortable there.
So Loretta is part of the East Side neighborhood.
Yeah.
And was it still I don't know, was it still, did it have rough edges then?
Yeah, of course. Yes, of course. I mean, you'd have, every third house would be this immaculate, pride of home ownership.
Right.
And then there'd be two that you're just like, does somebody actually live there? There was a lot, that neighborhood has gone through a lot of work over the last, 15 years, 20 years since we've been there. To me, I'm a little more comfortable with that type of environment as opposed to, the cookie cutter platform, just personally.
All right, this is the May 13th edition of the Big Buccaneer Channel, which is in its second year of talking only about Oceanside. It's a weekly podcast, and it's May 13th, and everybody you're hearing, all three folks here have a birthday, May 13th, and different decades, I should point out. Well, two of us in the same decade, another one a lot younger, but anyway, that's what happens. And we've got Roddy Browning and Ross Charles. And so when you saw, I interrupted you, about 2011, you said you saw the vacancy of the market, and you decided to open.
Well, I walk in and I speak to the owner at the time, and I'd been there a couple times to try to get food, and for some odd reason, his cook was never there, and the place just didn't look like it was kept very well. And there's lots of like expired, dried food and canned goods on the shelves. I mean, it was just a matter of time, and he was trying to sell it to me, at the time, because he could see that gleam in my eye.
And it was a market. It
was a market, but it had the bones, it had the essentials. It had a cooler, it had an ADA restroom, and it had what's called at the time a grease trap, which now we have to use grease interceptors. But it had and a hood system, for cooking. So it had all these essentials, but it definitely needed a facelift. So lo and behold, he ended up just vacating the property because he was not current with his landlord. Yeah, so I submitted my menu to John Daly, and he blessed it, and we signed the paperwork. And then I showed up with I had one investor, and I showed up with him after I'd signed the lease, and my investor just looked at me and shook his head and said, I can't give you any money. He's like, I'll never get it back. And I said, well, okay. So we'd already signed the lease. It was already on the hook. So
wow,
we just made it happen.
What a story.
Yeah.
And the Flying Pig was born, and briefly, the concept.
Well, the concept was just simple. The idea of good ingredients. You try to use as much local produce as you possibly can, and that was what we were missing. Is that we had so much. It was back in the day when we had like macaroni grills and all that stuff off the 78 there, and it was all about these corporate restaurants. And we wanted to be anti-corporate, wanted to be fresh, seasonal. And just, yes, a hamburger is not the greatest thing for you, but a hamburger that's made with better beef and that's made with the homemade local bun, it is better for you. It's a better product, and it supports more local people. That was the idea, was just make it as like a little farm-to-table gastropub. That was really the beginnings of it.
Gastropub, and lo and behold, very soon after you opened, the Flying Pig was heralded as launching the new wave of Oceanside emerging as a place for foodies.
I think the Pig really just opened opportunities for a lot of people. I mean, there were people that were before us, David specifically and Lauren, when they had like the fish joint. There was 333, there was Harney Sushi, but I really think that, the pig really opened people's eyes to like, whoa, this community wants these really cool little mom and pop places. They want to really stand behind them, and that's really what the pig did.
All right, this is the Big Buccaneer channel. This is our special birthday edition. All three folks we're speaking to today happen to have the same May 13th birthday. And this is, of course, a pre-recorded segment. And we're going to have more with Roddy Browning and Ross Charles.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the BBC.
This is the Big Buccaneer channel. We produce a new show every Wednesday, and this is all Oceanside all the time. We'd love to hear from you at osidebbc@gmail.com or at our phone at 442-452-2623. That's 442-452-2623. And we're speaking with birthday boys Roddy Browning and Ross Charles. Now, we just heard Roddy falling in love with the original site on Tremont near Wisconsin Street. And Charles, you, way back, you came to Oceanside one of those decades ago. And then in the early 90s, you saw the building on Hill Street, later renamed Coast Highway, of course. And right in the middle of that block there, I think it's the 100 block of South Hill Street, there used to be the Coronet book stand. Mm-hmm. And it was a magazine rack, and it was the last of the Mohicans as far as a true magazine and paperback, and it had some porn in there as well, but it really had every kind of magazine you'd want. And that went away. And that you saw that as an opportunity. Tell us what was going through your mind.
Well, I started when I used to, I've been in the export business for a very long time. My family owns their own custom horse broker in Jamaica, so I started out doing that. So when I get out of the military, I started to work. I used to drive to Los Angeles every day to work because most of the shipping companies, they were like in LA. So I decided I wanted to start something. And I remember one time I went to the swap meet with a friend of mine, and I see this one gentleman was selling some Rasta stuff from Jamaica, and he was just BSing people. And I never forget, I stood there and I looked at it and I said, I don't want anybody to exploit my culture. And my friend was wanting to know, why are you so upset? He's just trying to make a buck. And I said, you can't do that. And that was the time that gave me an inspiration. So I started to get some stuff and I went to the swap meet. And the first time I went to the swap meet, I almost turned back because I had a good job. Why am I at the swap meet? And when I went there, I felt a little pride. And I saw people were selling for Mercedes-Benz and different things. And I said, wow. And so I just pushed this pride aside, get on there. And the first day I made like $500.
Selling what?
Rasta stuff, Jamaican product.
Like what Rasta stuff?
Bob Marley stuff, jewelry, carvings, many things that's come from Jamaica. Because that was the inspiration that I got when that guy was trying to exploit people, telling stuff about my culture. So after a while, I've been going, and one day I was driving, I said, I want to have a store. Just like the Flying Pig, I want to have a store. One day I was driving down Hill Street, and I saw this, said, for rent. It was 111, 105 South Coast. That we had right next to the bar. And
the bar was, what was it called?
Rusty Spur.
No. It was.
We're gonna get there.
Damn it. Anyway,
yes.
the bar's still there. It's now the Oside Bar and Grill, but it had a different name.
Yeah, it was owned by But anyhow, when I called the lady and I tell her I would like this place, and she said, "Oh, we're gonna have a TV repair." I said, "You don't need to give it to anyone." And I never forget. She came down there and I just wrote her a check. Just give and said, "Take this." I said, "Don't cash it until this time." And just when she decided to give me the place, I went in there and it was just like run down, just like the Flying Pig was telling you. But I know what I wanted to do. And I decided to look. So I remember when she gave me the key, I spent a whole couple of weeks just doing everything. It was terrible.
Now, how many square, was it like 1,000 square feet?
No, that's the smallest store. It wasn't. It was smaller.
Oh, okay.
Because I remember I started there before I go to the 105.
Okay. So you started selling, and it was called Trade Routes, or no, it was, I'm sorry. It was
Earth Culture.
Earth Culture.
Yes.
Duh, I'm sorry.
Earth Culture.
Earth Culture. Now, there were other reggae stores in San Diego, or reggae.
Yeah, there was one in Encinitas.
Yes.
And there was one in San Diego. Trade Routes.
Those were Trade Routes.
Yes.
Right. And
So-
yours was Earth Culture.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why I gave it that name, because I didn't want anybody to think it was a Jamaican store. So I had section on the wall that says, from different islands all over the place. So and I have in my display, I want to have one item from each culture to be in that display. So if you're walking by and you see something, you got to come in. And that was the fundamental of the whole store.
How hard was it to pay your rent in the beginning?
It was kind of tricky because I was working at the same time, and although I wanted to do this,
Were you in the Marine Corps then?
yes,
Okay.
I at the time I want to do this, but when you're getting a steady paycheck, you kind of wanted to do that because you were uncertain about even what you believe in. So I used to work and come there in the evening, and people used to always said, "What happened?" You said, "People have been coming here looking," and through an intervention, one day I was at this place working in Vista. They used to export a lot of massage board and stuff like that. Earth Light it called. And this guy who was the supervisor, the shipper, he didn't come to work one day. And all the thing that he used to do in a week, I did like in 2 days with this one Mexican kid. And when he came back to work that day, everybody was kind of coming to me instead of going to him. And I think he kind of felt uncomfortable. And that guy get me fired. I never forget that. And I went to my store and I stood there and I said, you know what? Maybe I have a gold mine here. Maybe I just need to just start a mining. And I get this one book. They used to have this one booklet where show you where all the swap meets and all the shows at and stuff like that. And I said, if this is going to provide for me, I got to put the effort. And that's how I started to go out. And to get more product in my store, I used to have people bring stuff on consignment. So they used to send people there, and that's how my traffic started to.
And initially, what were some of the misgivings that the Oceansiders had over you, or maybe the police had over you, or maybe the city of Oceanside had?
Oh, that's a very good question, because you see, Oceanside was more like infested with gangs, a lot of unusual stuff. And I'm a Jamaican, opening a store in the middle of all that. But for me, I didn't even know it at that time. I was right in there. So the moment you see a Jamaican open a store in Oceanside, everybody think there was something. So you have a lot of undercover cops used to come in all the time. And I never forget this one day. This cop coming in, he put some weed on the thing, and he looked at me. And I thought I was going to be excited, and I said, don't embarrass me. I never forget that. And he looked at me, and he tried to kind of like, trying to use his diplomacy to kind of just, and I tell him to do one thing. I said, even if you're trying to entrap me, that's not the way to do things. And he kind of looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, because you're just acting based on your job. And my job is to do what I'm doing, and your job is to do what you're doing. But at the same time, at this time, there's nothing here that you're going to try to do because I'm not a part of that.
Yeah.
And he kind of just left. And then one time after that, there was this girl. I mean, I think she like mixed in Colombian. Beautiful girl. I'm telling you, Ray Charles could see her beauty. And she came in the shop and she was just like a high stress trying to figure out how she could get a little weed because she's stressed and she wanted to do this. And I looked at her and she tried everything. And to make a long story short, one time I said to her, I know where you can get some weed.
So she was a decoy, you think?
Yes.
Okay.
And I said, I know where you can get it. And she said, oh, I'm so happy. And I'm glad you get my trust. I said, let's call 911.
But so you were there for how many years? Earth Culture?
27 years.
27 years. And finally, on that block, there's 2 vacancies right now. And it's my understanding that the landlord who controls most of those buildings there is really going ape with his rent. and it's, I don't know, you call it gentrification or call it what, or greediness or what.
I started paying $300 a month
Wow.
in that area. $300
on Coast Highway.
Yes, and then it went up and it went up and it went up, and then I remember one time the rent increased when they were making that new hotel, and they were telling me all the visitors gonna come, and I said, but the visitor can come, but it doesn't change the structure of the building, and most of those buildings are old, because I remember one time I have an idea to do something and they couldn't have done it because they wanted to open a restaurant one time, and because they have to do all that. What you call for the grease trap, it would be very expensive, and some of the bathroom situation. So what they were trying to tell you that some of those buildings, because of they're so old, they could be grandfathered in. Mm-hmm. And I said whether it could be grandfather or grandmother, whatever, grandchildren, it wouldn't make a difference. So I remember one time, when I left because of the whole COVID thing, and we got a situation where I was trying to buy the building, and the owner, Mr. Tetley, very good gentleman. When they passed away, he has a daughter. And the daughter has this one husband who think he was kind of like one of those politicians want to be in high society. And he gives me a very difficult time. And I decided we had was to go to court. And I remember we kind of settled something because I was going to have a lawsuit against him for some discrimination. And my lawyer told me one thing: if you don't hold the building, it's going to keep happening. Yeah. So you just have to, leave. And that's how I kind of, but I just want to let you know this. When I was trying to buy the building, it was kind of like a struggle going through, and it get to a certain point where the rent becomes so high. So right now I decided to find out how I could rent the place, and they told me that it was going to be $8,000 a month. The check cashing place, which is right next to it, was vacant too. And they have, when I called them, it was for $7,000 something. And there was going to be a 2% increase for the length of the time.
What year was that?
You mean?
Well, what year was that when you're talking about these rents? What year was that?
Well, like
2020, I mean, right?
2020, okay.
Yeah, 2022, yeah, something like that.
Okay.
And it's the same thing. So when you see a lot of people down there in the rent, if you notice, none of these businesses that open have any long life standing, right, because it's ridiculous.
And I think, Charles, it's gone only more through the roof. My understanding is the Masters building is the rent there is, I'm told, $25,000 a month, and that's a much bigger
25,000.
Yeah, that's a much bigger area, but still that's outrageous. Roddy, when you first opened the Pig, yep, what was some of the resistance from the locals, or some of the misunderstanding, or what sort of hillbilly blowback did you get?
There was there was a building inspector that came in and asked if we had a permit. Well, we were just doing some cosmetic stuff, so we thought. I had an architect, we had plans, we had everything that we thought we needed, and he changed our minds with that and sent in this other building inspector that spent 2 hours going over and just making this laundry list of stuff that we needed to do to make it compliant to be a restaurant. And at that point, we, what little money that we had borrowed, we were pretty much out. And so I just went to, I think it was Steve Jones at the time. I think he's retired now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the head building inspector. And I just said, Mr. Jones, if you enforce all these things, I mean, it was probably like 40 or 50 things that were required, one of which was like an air conditioning and HVAC unit. I mean, all these very expensive things. I just said to him, I was like, if you enforce this, we're not going to open. And so he just said, put a heater in it and all the rest of the things. He's like, get to it when you can. And we did. But that was probably the biggest hurdle was we were almost about ready to open. And he actually walked in and said his exact words were, I had these glasses, had this military butch haircut, and he just said, y'all got a building permit? And me, because I was working there at the time, my chef, he was also helping out a couple of construction guys and our designer or architect. We all just kind of stunned look on our face like, huh? Type thing. But that was the biggest hurdle. But after that, once we opened, The first few weeks were challenging because just nobody knew who we were. And then we got a little hit as Best New Gastropub Oceanside from San Diego Magazine, and that was really what kind of just started it off. And then Troy Johnson came and did an article on us that was at the same time as San Diego Magazine, or same magazine, same publication. And the only resistance that we had was when we tried to put in a patio, and that was just an arm wrestling match with somebody that was, their interpretation of a certain code versus what I thought was, common sense. But what do I know? I'm not a code enforcement personnel. But other than that, I mean, that was the only hiccup was in the beginning. I mean, we did the first week we were open. This lady that was dressed nice walks in the front door and she's bleeding and she's crying, and she asked me, I'm standing at the door, and she's like, "Can I use your bathroom?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this lady just got beat up." So she goes back to the bathroom. Well, 2 hours later, there were 8 fire trucks. There was about 10 police cars. She had locked herself in the bathroom and was doing heroin. So that probably kind of put us on the map a little bit for
Welcome
the locals
to
too.
Oceanside.
Yeah, exactly.
But of course, it's all different now. However, where you are now, the Flying Pig right near Mission,
Yep.
they're still homeless.
Yeah, and I've seen, it's interesting because we see new rounds, we see new faces, and I always wonder, it's like, where do they come from? How do they get here? What are they doing? What's the enticement? What's the, we do have, there's a security detail that does help quite a bit with it, but they're not 24/7. But yeah, there's still that element, and it's, I know it's tough to get away from it, but at the same time, families come to Oceanside to enjoy the beach, and seeing those types of things is not encouraging. At least it wouldn't encourage me to come back, with my children. So I'm hoping that we can kind of work past that. But yeah, it's interesting because, like I said, it's a round of new faces every few months, and that's just peculiar to me.
A round of new homeless faces.
Yeah. Some go away, and then we get new ones. It's a little puzzling for sure.
And then what about the, I don't know, the city of Oceanside or Main Street, or, the whole, you're right there, you are forced to interface with the Thursday market, the daytime market and the nighttime market.
I have nothing against the daytime market whatsoever because it's an actual farmer's market.
Yep.
My issue is, and I'm happy to go on record by saying this, is that, the nighttime market, and I know it's great for Oceanside, it brings a lot of traffic in, and I'm all for that, and it was there before I got there. My issue is that with the expansion is when they laid more competition on our brick and mortar doorsteps, up the street. They took away, I think I counted a little over 100 parking spaces and laid competition right on our doorstep. And that I have a problem with because I think it's one thing to, to have a celebration, and we should celebrate Oceanside because it's an amazing place to be. But to, what is considered to be a nonprofit organization, that was a very self-preserving act that wasn't discussed with any of the brick and mortars. And I own my building too. So I'm not just saying it from my business side of things. I'm saying it from a building owner that I don't think that was a good move, and it wasn't discussed as it should have been. We embrace it because we have to, but that's my slowest day of the week.
Well, but not only is it necessarily direct competition, but it swallows up parking, and there's no parking. And
we've had some violent issues as well. We've had some fights and stuff that are concerning. I mean, especially like I said, if someone's sitting on my patio with their young kids, and you see there was a fight that broke out right next door to me. To the tone of someone slammed someone into a glass window that broke the window. So I mean, that happened a while ago, and I'm hopeful that that they recognize that it is a very special environment, but we also need to make sure we protect that environment. And I think that the expansion should have been discussed with the brick and mortars, because we pay into the bid fee as being owners, and then we collect sales tax, and we provide jobs and all these things for the locals. I really kind of felt that was I don't know. I'm still a little miffed about that. So,
well, that is Roddy Brown, and we've also got Ross Charles here, and we're talking about our Oceanside, our love of Oceanside, and the fact that we're all here and we're all turning another year older on May 13th, and sort of our birthday show. So thank you for joining us here. This is a special edition of the Big Buccaneer Channel, the all Oceanside station. And thanks for joining us here on the BBC. This is the Big Buccaneer Channel, the Oceanside station. We come to you every week. We put a new one up. This is May 13th edition for 2026, and this is our birthday edition, and we're talking to 3 birthday people, including myself, and that would be Roddy Browning from the Flying Pig and Ross Charles, who is a Rastaman, true, as he would say. And it's sort of interesting to note that Rasta men don't eat pork, and of course Roddy Browning's namesake is the Flying Pig. So I guess that's just sort of an interesting universe coincidence here we've got going on here. But we're not going to make you eat any pork product, Charles, I promise. Roddy, you just celebrated 15 years.
Yep.
As the proprietor of the Flying Pig, and your success in Oceanside allowed you to sort of buy your own building in Vista, and then you were able to sell that and then buy your building in Oceanside, and you sort of cracked the code. You know, congratulations to you, sir, on that. And that's a huge deal. Of course, it's sometimes I'm sure you wish you could. It's like, it's so hard and so difficult, but nevertheless, what are some of the positive things we're looking at here as you start your 16th year as the Flying Pig proprietor?
Well, I think that, Oceanside, as much as, there's definitely some resistance with the, with the buildings going in, all the apartments and whatnot. And this place is going to change and you need to embrace it. And I think that while we do see a lot of this construction is happening pretty fast, there's a lot of other communities that is sprouted up even faster. And I like the fact that things are not in a giant hurry to change, because I like the way Oceanside is. But at the same time, we have to embrace that. You have to embrace that change, because it's going to happen whether or not, we are all for it or whether or not we're against it. And from a business side of things, we're going to see some challenges with some parking. We know that already, but we will definitely see an increase of people. And I think that, while that's inevitable, like I said, I think places like mine and my wife and I, by putting a stake in the sand, so to speak, of saying, we're locals, we own this building, we're not going anywhere for as long as we're here, instead of it turning into another, Starbucks chain, whatever the case may be. I think that solidifies, our special part of the Oceanside that we provide, is that, we have a promise that we'll provide this mom and pop establishment as long as we can. And I'm hoping that more people will follow with that, because again, change is inevitable. And I think that it's going to be better for our business, obviously. I think the location that we've chosen now, there's more foot traffic, there's more visibility. I love the building. It was an old historic building. We've redone everything, to make it modern. And it's just part of the history of Oceanside, and it's not going to go anywhere for as long as I'm here. And I look forward to, kind of seeing what Oceanside can do as long as we do it in the right manner. And so far, it looks like there's going to be a lot of congestion, a lot of traffic, and, less parking. But, hopefully by all of us getting together and speaking our mind, people that matter, I think, especially people that live in the immediate area, I think it's positive. It's positive change as long as you're part of the solution, and try not to be just the negative aspect of it. So.
Well, all right. So the city just bought the building at 615,
Yep.
a block away, and some people said, well, if they're gonna buy buildings, why couldn't they have bought the Bank of America building? Because then they would have had the building itself to put in whatever they wanted to put in there, and they would have had all that parking lot area. What do you think about that idea?
I agree with that. I think that you could have the what they were trying to accomplish with putting in it's a book archive. Is that the idea?
Well, it's related to library and reading and that kind of stuff, So it's,
Yeah, I'm not sure what decision was made and why, but the fact is that we do need to protect parking for not only obviously people coming to town, but people that live there. They have to have a place to park their vehicles, and then you got the street sweeping, and then now we've got the 20-foot off of the intersection rule and all these things. I think maybe that. I don't want to speak for the city, but maybe it was a pricing thing, maybe it was an availability thing. I'm not sure, but maybe they should look at it as buying it as something else and then utilizing that parking.
Are you in hindsight in favor of the city deciding to make Mission Avenue one way and having that back in parking thing?
I love the idea of the one way because it represents like the gateway into Oceanside. And when you come up over the hill, like when I come over to work every day and I look over and I can see the ocean, and it just has this magical, feel about it.
Yes.
The backing in thing, I think was I'm not sure was thought out because I think it causes more problems than it handles. But at the same time, too, is when they did that, they added sidewalk, which of course then we got an encroachment permit, so we were actually allowed to have an outside patio. Because before, back in the day when I first got here, Mission was a 2-lane highway, and the sidewalks were maybe 3 feet wide. So I do like obviously, and it's beneficial to me in my business. But as far as like the backing in thing, it's entertaining to actually watch people do it because people just aren't used to doing it.
What a waste of time it is. I don't get it. But Charles, if you were to come back, of course, we should point out you have a weekly show on AM 1320, the Palomar College radio station, which has its transmitter towers on Oceanside Boulevard, and you're on every Tuesday night with your 3-hour reggae show. But if you were to come back and reopen Earth Culture, selling imported culture items from Jamaica and what have you, would you consider doing it again in Oceanside?
I would, without a doubt. I still think about having a place, and I'm always looking once in a while because it's when I close, I remember I have so many people that I still deliver stuff to because I still have an online store, earthcultureroots.com, that I still supply to people. People want incense, especially the oil. There are some things that I think about when you have a store nowadays is the walk-in customer. You might have a lot of competition with people online, selling certain things. So people are lazy, so they want to get things delivered to them. But there's certain items that I have in my store, like the oils that I have, essential oils. I basically design certain things and incense, and people still buy. And I found out that there's a lot of people that store used to impact that I didn't even know. A lot of young kids used to come there, and we used to just talk about like life and different things, and they always wanted to wonder how I never smoked because I'm a Rastaman. And I think some of those things, they used to come in there looking for different things, and it changed the whole conversation to life stories. And one thing in particular, I remember this kid called me the other day, and his mom was telling me that he was crying when he found out that the store was closed. He used to come there every day, and I always think that he used to want to steal something, but he was just quiet. He was shy, never having a friend. And I used to just talk to him. And now he becomes a prominent person in the society. And every day he told me that I hope other kids got impacted the way he did. And it's not only because of my selling thing, but I encounter, it's just like even when I met Ken here. I had a soccer team from the Oceanside High School. I used to be the girls' soccer coach. And he invited me to the show that he used to have.
To the talk show on AM 1000
Yes.
KCEL, right? Okay.
And that is what inspired me to start a show that I have called Yard Sound and Reggae. So Ken is a great influence to me in terms of a lot of different things right here in Oceanside. But it's a great place, no matter what it is. And I think when you look at Oceanside, if it has a lot more cultural thing, instead of just like trying to be this kind of like, uppity kind of a thing, it would create a lot more community thing, like Mr. Flying Pig said earlier on. It makes a lot of sense. And I think you have to have an inclusive kind of a thing to really make people becomes more unified instead of trying to have like an upper echelon to kind of separate people, because I think that's one of the reasons why the society is the way it is today. But I would love to find a store. So if anyone out there listening and you have a place to rent, I'm ready. I am so ready.
That's awesome.
That's cool. Well, this is I hope you find it, sir. And by the way, we're all getting older, but some of us do not feel our age or act our age. I must say that. I don't know if I look my age, but I don't think I act my age. And nor, sir, do you, Ross. And Roddy, you're a few years behind us, but Oceanside is still a good place to live, right?
It's a wonderful community. I love Oceanside so much. I love spending time here. My kid grew up on the beaches here, going to the pier. It's just, we just celebrated her 14th birthday, in the fire pits. And it's just, it's a very family oriented, and I don't want that to change for sure.
And what do you both of you guys think about the fact that people think that Carlsbad, and this has been true for decades, has this elitism, and Oceanside has a grittiness to it? Anybody?
I think it's fair to say that it's just they're two different they're two different types of neighborhood. You go to Carlsbad and everything is very nice. Everything is very manicured, and it's just a different environment. You come to Oceanside, and I think you expect a little more beach flavor, and Oceanside has kind of kept that, which I like. It's not to say that one is better than the other. It's just different. So it attracts different types of people.
I think sometimes Carlsbad is Stepford-wise with their it's just stuff. I don't know.
Hey, man, some people like, 8 colors in a crayon box. Some people like 64. That's just the way it is.
Oh, damn it. There you go.
But I think personally it's just based on how in the past Oceanside was considered kind of like a more ghetto, and it was more uppity in Carlsbad. But Oceanside kind of changed, because I remember like in the backside, when you're going down towards the harbor, I had this one girlfriend that she was a Navy, and she used to travel, and she had a little condo that she'd buy down this, and I used to keep it for her. And she was telling me that she was going to buy a house closer to the harbor. And she told me the price. I said, but that's a crack haven. And it's like, she said, no. And then I remember I started to go down and start to transform it.
Yeah.
And it's much, much better than even Carlsbad. The whole place. When you find people walking their dogs at nights, it showed that comfort. There was nothing happening. But people still see that whole Oceanside. I had a very good friend of mine, and they're very wealthy. And one time I was doing a soccer program at the pier, and I invited them to come. And the lady told me, she said, if it wasn't for me, she would have never let her daughter come here. She said, we don't come here. Charles, we don't come here. I said, why? She said, that's just how it is. And when she came for the first time and she had to come to the pier to pick up her daughter, she said she wanted to thank me for inviting her daughter, because she has never known that Oceanside was this the way it is.
They have beautiful beaches.
Yes.
Too.
So a lot of times it's just how people perceive things and hear things. And one of the things, experience teaches wisdom. You know what I mean? A lot of times people just take things as a face value. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
a lot of times if they started to do things in a much more unified manner, supportive manner, things would actually change.
Charles, you used to put on reggae shows at the band shell at the pier.
Reggae by the Pier.
Reggae by the Pier, and I've always maintained we are really underutilizing that band shell.
It is. You're right. The first time, I've been in the reggae industry for a very long time. I grew up with a lot of different artists, and even when I opened my store, and this is very important, opening my store, all the things that I've learned and involved with when I was growing up, and when I opened my store, it just intertwines with it to make it becomes what it is. So I decided to do a reggae concert at the pier because people used to travel to Los Angeles, reggae on the river for miles, and I used to wonder how they have to go that far when they could just do it here. And the first year when I put it together, they gave me a very difficult time with all of that kind of stuff. Never forget. And I remember, I don't know if you can remember, the first year when I did it, it was a struggle. And my wife at the time, she's a very organized person. So when we decide how the city is, you see, if we go and the city said they need a hut, we can give them a hotel. If they need a pin, we're ready for them till they get to a certain point where they couldn't do nothing. And at the last day when we were supposed to do the show, they tell me that, oh, you need to get more security. And you have to get the security that goes through the city. And I'm saying, at this time, but anyway, find a way to get through it. And I remember the second year when we was going to do the show, there was this one lady who wrote something. She said, the only thing that we don't like about the show is that because it's associated with weed. And I remember the police chief just come and said, how many people are going to have there? And I told him, and he just wrote it off. And the second year, it was the best show. They've never seen anything like that because it was organized. It was just something, I think Oceanside misses that. Every other state city does certain things. And I wanted was to do something at the time. The mayor at the time was allowing me to kind of be a part of that whole program. Mm-hmm. And then he left and it just died. But if they can utilize that area to do something, it would be.
We have the band show. We have the harbor. We have Oceanside has a lot of very underutilized, very special.
But they have uneducated people and ignorant people who just live onto this. This is how you do it, Ken. This is very important. If you have some people who, if you hold on to a block of ice in your hand, mm-hmm. and it will burn you for a while, until after a while your hands become numb. You feel that you don't feel anything. Some people are like that. They're holding on to certain things and think that they're strong. But at the same time, if their fingers started to move like an octopus, they can do a lot more things. But they're afraid to put down that ice because they think they're strong holding on and not knowing that their hands are just numb.
And by the way, Charles has all kinds of these life parables on his radio show, which airs on 1320 every Tuesday night. From
8 until 11.
8 until 11. And so we should point that out. And your website again, sir?
Yardsound.com is the radio. And for the store is earthcultureroots.com.
All right. And Roddy Browning, we should point out that you have done quite two big things you did. Not only the concept of the restaurant, but you had an opportunity when you bought the building to rent out your big room to a business. And you said, no, I'm going to chance it, and you won with that because you're renting out the room because you're in such a good location. People and the food's very good. People want to rent out, not only go there to eat, but have events and parties there and rent out the whole room. That's
weddings and birthdays is the biggest one that we do. Yeah,
that happens through. I mean, all the time.
The East Wing is very popular about that because it seats up to 50 guests comfortably, and there's not a whole lot of big rooms like that are what I feel is affordable, without going to the hotels and whatnot. So that has been part of the success. And the tenant that we had before him, which was Sandy Toes. They decided to leave, and then we had
gift
a couple.
Store.
Yep, it was a gift store. They'd been there for a while. They decided to leave, which they were still under lease, but we let them out of the lease, no big deal. And it was actually my wife. I wanted to turn it into a wine shop, and it was my wife. I was like, "No, we're going to turn this into a private dining room."
Scored big, and you also have a really thriving. People don't know this. We're catering.
Yeah. Yeah, we do offsites quite a bit. We just did one for Hohen Porsche a couple of nights ago, and so we do anywhere from 1,000 people to, this one I think was 35 or 30 or 35. So yeah, we just try to stay active. It's all about the hustle.
It's all about the hustle. Roddy Browning of the Flying Pig and Ross Charles of Earth, as he would say, Earth Culture. And when you say third world, you're not saying turd. It's just the way you say third, right? There's
a joke about this. When I was in the military, I I remember they used to give me a hard time because I was in 3rd platoon. You know, and every time they asked me, so what platoon are you in? I said, a 3rd. And they used to give me a hard time to say, you think this is a shit platoon and all those different kind of things, not even knowing, because in Jamaica you have to put your tongue between your teeth and, you know, kind of say it. But in terms of English, you know, we were so hungry that we used to eat our vowels all the time. So we just say it the way that it's supposed to be. So in just making that,
So hungry we ate our vowels.
yeah,
That's
you know,
a good
in
one.
3rd platoon, and it was a problem for me. It was hard for me in the military. They used to make fun of me all the time, but it was fine.
Well,
it's a culture thing.
Roddy Browning and Ross Charles, thank you very much for joining us today on this birthday show. We're all a year older on May 13th, 2026. We don't have to go into details, but let's just say we're going to say happy birthday and let it go at that. And you guys, thanks very much for joining us.
Happy birthday, gentlemen.
But I will just say this: if you keep on doing what you've always done, you'll keep on being what you've always been. Do the right thing.
Do the right thing, as Charles says. Until next week, thank you, Oceanside.
Happy, happy birthday, baby. Although you with somebody new, thought I'd drop a line to say that I wish this happy day would find me beside you. Happy, happy birthday, baby.